They say curiosity killed the cat, but for these two young men who were driven by a chilling obsession to imitate Russia's most infamous serial killers, it was worse. Siberia is an immense federal district of Russia well known for its extreme climatic conditions, especially when it comes to cold, with temperatures dropping as low as -71 degrees. Perhaps this explains why there aren't many people in this region. Next to Lake Baikal is one of the most populous cities in Siberia, Irkutsk. Here two young boys are born, Artyom Anafriv, born on October 4, 1992, and a few months later, on March 24, 1993, Nikita Litkin. Neither of them will truly have a gentle childhood. On the contrary, they will experience quite terrible moments. In Artyom's case, his absent father didn't seem to have a detrimental impact on his social integration. Yet, appearances can be deceiving, as his past reveals. Nina, his mother, exerts intense control over his life, instilling strict values and criticizing his teachers for poor grades. This leads to school interventions, but Nina remains overbearing, causing some teachers to avoid teaching Artyom's class. This isolates him initially, but he eventually makes friends. As he enjoyed his youth, Artyom's academic performance declined, worrying his mother. He started university in medicine and works part-time at a city museum, seemingly leading an ordinary life. However, his mother's influence sets the stage for a significant event. Engaging in hostile online discussions with Armenians led to a violent assault, and the lack of legal action fueled his anger, plunging him into darkness, joined by others in his descent. Nikita Litkin's childhood was marred by his absent father, who worked on construction sites, leaving his mother, Marina, to raise him. When his father left for another woman, tragedy struck when his new wife died, and his stepbrother took his own life, deeply affecting Nikita and making him feel unloved. In elementary school, he had a submissive friendship with Arthur Lysenko, eventually learning to assert himself and reducing Arthur's influence. Academically gifted but unhappy in a specialized math class, Nikita's performance declined, leading to disputes with classmates and acts of retaliation. His personality shifted toward violence, unnoticed by his mother, who turned to religion and increased working hours. Nikita's deteriorating psychological state became evident, prompting her to send him to a psychologist who recommended giving him more space and autonomy. In a deep state of depression, Nikita met another boy, Artyom, at Arthur's birthday party, marking a pivotal moment in his life. Instantly, a connection forms between the two, partly due to their relatively similar pasts. Artyom's unique friendship with Nikita stands out from his previous experiences, where friends often manipulated or intimidated him due to his extreme introversion. Artyom, on the other hand, offers a supportive ear during a challenging period in Nikita's life, a gesture that deeply impacts him. This newfound understanding and support mark a significant change for Nikita, alienating his other friends, who become hostile. As they progress through high school, Nikita loses interest in academics and, with Artyom, delves into researching Russian serial killers online. They form a music group known for its brutal lyrics, expressing a fascination with violence and the darker aspects of human nature, though no actual violence occurs. Their close friendship begins to strain relationships with their mothers, especially Artyom's clashes with Nina, leading to physical confrontations. The arguments become audible to neighbors in their apartment building. Simultaneously, they connect with a Russian extremist group, gaining a sense of importance. However, Nikita's Georgian origins resulted in his exclusion from the organization. Despite this, Artyom shares the group's hate-filled ideology with Nikita, though it lacks actual action, which both find unimpressive compared to their existing admiration for serial killers and their penchant for violent discourse during gatherings. Immersed in the disturbing world of Russian killers, Artyom and Nikita fixate on the eerily similar Viktor Sayenko and Igor Supraniak, igniting their desire to continue the Dnepropetrovsk maniac's gruesome legacy. Isolated and morally corrupted, they sever connections with friends and family, determined to become murderers. As they contemplate their choice of victim, method, and location, doubts arise about matching the infamy of their predecessors. Roaming Irkutsk streets, primarily in the university district, they identify potential targets targets, but realized the need for careful preparation. The question of possessing the ruthlessness to emulate Russia's notorious killers and gain notoriety plagued them. Over a week, they meticulously select an arsenal of hammers, mallets, knives, and a baseball bat for their impending crime. On Sunday, November 14th, two young men in the Irkutsk State University neighborhood targeted an 18-year-old woman, Anastasia Markov. They followed her discreetly, armed with a mallet. Despite attacking her from behind, she cleverly feigned death, surviving their initial blows. Anastasia's attempt to report the assault to the police was dismissed, prompting her to share her story online. Artyom and Nikita, her attackers, engaged with her online, seeking to refine their methods. Unconcerned about being identified, these two cold-hearted individuals roamed the city streets without finding another suitable target until November 24th, when they struck again. Their second victim, a 46-year-old woman, was attacked similarly, but this time, the attackers intended to ensure her demise. Their plan was thwarted by a passing motorist, forcing them to flee, taking the woman's bag with them. The victim reported the assault to the police. Unfortunately, the authorities failed to connect the dots between the two attacks, treating the second one as a robbery. Frustration grew for Artyom and Nikita, who had now failed twice to achieve their murderous ambitions. However, they gained confidence and experience. Less than a week after their second attack, they set out on a new mission in the streets of Irkutsk, patiently waiting for a vulnerable victim while continuing to avoid men. One day, as they wandered through the university district, Artyom and Nikita come across 12-year-old Daniel Simonov, a familiar face from their school days. Regrettably for Daniel, he becomes the target of their sinister intentions. As the boy joyfully slides on the fresh snow of the Russian winter with his snow scooter, he becomes easy prey for the two burgeoning killers. Nikita suggests the sinister idea to Artyom, who readily concurs. Daniel recognizes them, so there's no initial fear. When the young men approach him openly, Nikita approaches, seemingly for a normal conversation, but within reach, he violently seizes the boy, brandishing a mallet to deliver a savage blow, instantly rendering young Daniel unconscious. Next, it's Artyom's turn to take over, not with the mallet, but with a baseball bat. He relentlessly attacks the child, striking him with 15 to 20 blows. But his ordeal is not over. Nikita takes control again and pulls out a pocket knife, which he stabs into the chest of young Daniel, causing him to collapse lifeless on the ground. Given the brutality of the assault, there is no chance this time that their victim has survived. They took their time, relentlessly assaulted him, and they can finally leave, satisfied that they have taken a life and partially satisfied with the hatred that consumes them. When Daniel's parents realize their child hasn't returned from his snow scooter ride, they immediately begin searching for him. They eventually find Daniel in a pool of blood in the snow, miraculously alive despite the brutal attack. Unfortunately, an ambulance's delayed arrival due to traffic prevents saving him, and he passes away in his parents' presence. Daniel is the first victim of Artyom and Nikita. Initially, no one suspects murder. It's assumed he had a snow scooter accident. The injuries are attributed to a collision with a tree. But this theory has flaws: no vehicle damage, undisturbed trees, and no evidence in the snow. Moreover, the injuries differ. Some resemble tree collisions, others sharp object wounds. The police's investigation remains superficial, settling for the accident theory, leaving Artyom and Nikita unchecked. Instead, young Daniel Semyonov served as practice for killers who were just beginning their macabre careers. 2 weeks after this first murder in the university district, Olga Pirog, a 69-year-old woman and researcher at the Physics Research Institute of the university, passed close to the location where young Daniel Semyonov tragically lost his life. Sadly for her, that evening she entered the radar of Artyom and Nikita, who, before launching their attack, recorded an audio recording capturing their conversation about the strategy they would adopt to end the poor woman's life. They didn't turn off the recorder, which they kept on, even at the moment they initiated the attack. Their technique had apparently worked well during the murder of the child. Nikita approached Olga from behind, immobilizing her, while Artyom quickly and repeatedly stabbed the victim, causing her to collapse. Then a savage frenzy began, leaving the woman for dead in the middle of the street. She had been stabbed more than 30 times by the blade of a knife. The killers had improved. Their murder now took only seconds. They recorded audio files to relive the moments. Olga's lifeless body, with 30 knife wounds, was found hours later, her belongings untouched. Artyom and Nikita openly boasted about their murders on the internet, feeling superior and godlike. However, no one believed them, thinking they were just imposters. They had already killed 2 people but weren't considered serial killers yet. Their plan to reach the category of those they admired was set for next Wednesday. Inessa Svetlova, in her 30s, was walking through the University District, the hunting ground of Artyom and Nikita. At 6 p.m., the killers approached her. Sensing danger, Inessa turned and saw them close by, but they hesitated and decided to steal her handbag instead of attacking. Inessa wisely gives up her belongings and escapes. Despite this failed attempt, the duo remains determined, continuing their hunt for recognition on this fateful night. 1 hour after their first failed assault, at 7 p.m., Yekaterina Karpova becomes the next target for the 2 young men. Yekaterina, 22 years old and 8 months pregnant, just finished her volleyball coaching session and is heading home with her 6-year-old daughter, Olya Averina. Artyom and Nikita spotted them in the University District. They silently approached from behind, seizing Yekaterina, but failing to capture Olya. The child escaped after a blow to her liver. Yekaterina pleads for mercy, mentioning her pregnancy, but the heartless attackers continue their brutal assault. They take their time, breaking Yekaterina's fingers and smashing her head against a rock. However, a passing car appears, scaring off the assailants before they can take her life. Despite severe injuries, Yekaterina survives the ordeal inflicted by these 2 psychopaths. 2 attempts, 2 failures, and growing frustration for Artyom and Nikita, who still haven't achieved their gruesome goal to follow in the footsteps of the nation's most infamous serial killers. They didn't attempt anything more in the last days of 2010, but as soon as January 1st of the following year rolled around, they were back on the streets of Irkutsk, determined and consequently even more dangerous. It was very early in the morning, 5 a.m., when Artyom and Nikita spotted a man, seemingly homeless, taking refuge near a dumpster in an alley of the city. The 2 young men were armed with their mallet, and this homeless man was now their target as they headed towards him. With 2 against 1, the man had no chance and was violently struck with the mallet. The blows quickly fractured his skull. After that, Artyom and Nikita hit him over 40 times. The 2 young men left satisfied with their attack, convinced that they have finally committed their 3rd murder. But the man wasn't dead. He was still alive and was discovered by a passerby who called the emergency services. The man lost a lot of blood. The homeless man was immediately rushed to hospital. Unfortunately, his injuries were too severe. The doctors were unable to save his life, and moments after entering the hospital, the man finally gave up. Being homeless and having no identity papers, he remained unknown forever, and his family, if he had any, would never be informed of his tragic demise. That's it. By definition, Artyom and Nikita have officially become serial killers. However, they're nowhere near as effective as those they admired, and fortunately so, because their killing methods gave many people the opportunity to survive. Several victims have escaped or have been rescued thanks to an event. In the early morning of Sunday, January 30th, 2011, Artyom and Nikita came across Oleg Semyonov, a student who had been out all night celebrating on his way home. On the way, he was attacked by the duo armed with their mallets. The man is struck several times in the skull, resulting in concussion and numerous other injuries. Despite the attack, he was fortunate enough to escape and avoid certain death. In the aftermath of this attack, on Thursday, February 3rd, the duo attacked an elderly woman who was left for dead with severe lacerations to the head. She was finally saved in the end thanks to the intervention of passers-by who contacted emergency services. After these events, there's a slight lull, but Artyom and Nikita feel the need to kill again and go on the hunt again on Monday, February 21st. That evening, Alexander Maximov returns home after consuming enough alcohol to make him drunk. An intoxicated man is a prime target for the 2 killers who track him down. They innovate in the way they attack people on the street, now using an air gun for the first time and aiming for the man's head to collapse. He was still alive, but that didn't stop the boys from harming him. Nikita tries to do something with his eyes, but having no knowledge of anatomy, he was unable to remove them completely. It was a real tragedy. Of course, Alexander didn't survive such an ordeal. The two individuals injured the man's body before fleeing. The victim was in such a state that during his funeral, his body rested headless in a closed casket. His remains were kept as part of the investigation into his death. On Sunday, February 27th, something surprising happened. Usually, Artyom is the first to strike in attacks, with Nikita often arriving later and preferring to harm bodies. However, on this day, Nikita is alone on the street when he decides to harm someone. He notices a woman sitting on a bench, Nina Kuzmina, a local resident. He approaches her from behind, as usual, and strikes her twice on the head, causing the poor woman to scream immediately. The loud cries alert many in the neighborhood, including a neighbor who comes to his window. This panics Nikita, who decides to flee after stealing the woman's cell phone that he just assaulted. This is the first time one of the duo acts alone, and it demonstrates that they are not trained for this kind of behavior, but rather that they are working together with a common intent to do wrong. Furthermore, on March 11th, they resumed their habit of hanging around the university area together, and they no longer made an effort to distance themselves from their homes as they are close to Artyom's residence. They have identified Roman Fazulin, a homeless person in the city. The two young men prepared for a new attack. They approached the homeless man and then again used an air pistol to fire 2 bullets into the faces of their poor victims, who then faint. Together, they dragged the body of the unconscious man into some bushes to be more discreet. Nikita then pulls out his knife and stabs Roman. Nikita retrieves the sharp object and attempts to cut off the corpse's hand, but is unable to do so. His knife wasn't big enough for the task. He then turned to the man's little finger, which he cut off, before further mutilating the body. Artyom uses a camera to immortalize his macabre work, a sort of trophy for them. In March, 2 more attacks occurred, one stopped by a policeman who couldn't identify Artyom, and Nikita's, leading to another attack on a woman in a crowded area. They use a screwdriver to harm her and steal her handbag. The police are still clueless about the culprits, despite the incidents happening in the same area. On April 3, 2011, Artyom and Nikita confronted a homeless woman named Aleftina Kuydina. They attacked and killed her, making it their 6th victim. Feeling invulnerable, they filmed themselves alongside her disfigured body, sharing the video online. It went viral in Russia, but the police couldn't locate them. However, investigators eventually made a connection with the various assaults that had taken place in the university district, and therefore, they questioned the numerous survivors of these attacks. Some managed to identify their assailants and provided descriptions as precise as they could. By cross-referencing the information provided by the witnesses, a composite sketch of the sought-after killers was created. Despite this breakthrough, no new leads had opened up for the police. On the other hand, patrols in the area had increased, causing a drastic drop in the number of assaults. In fact, there were no more reported incidents, as the killers were undoubtedly deterred by the regular presence of the police in the city's neighborhood. One day, a woman had come across a composite sketch distributed by the authorities and had noticed a striking resemblance to her grandson. Disturbed by this, she had reported it to her son, who was also the boy's uncle. Intrigued, the uncle had visited Nikita Litkin's place, but couldn't find him. While in Nikita's room, he discovered a digital camera and decided to look through its files. To his horror, he stumbled upon a video showing Nikita and Artyom mutilating a seemingly lifeless woman. Filled with dread, the uncle had rushed to the nearest police station. This shocking video had led to the arrest of Artyom and Nikita, finally putting an end to their reign of terror that plagued the region for months. However, the investigation had taken nearly 2 years due to multiple victims, 6 killed, and around a dozen survivors, all requiring interviews. Both Artyom and Nikita had been placed in provisional detention. The trial had proved complex, with questions about who had committed which murder and the extent of their involvement. Artyom had admitted to only 2 murders, while Nikita, a minor at the time, had claimed he was influenced by his friend. Russian justice had rendered its verdict on Tuesday, April 2, 2013, finding Artyom Anufriyev and Nikita Litkin guilty of 6 murders and 9 attempted murders. Artyom was sentenced to life imprisonment, while Nikita had initially received a 24-year sentence, later reduced to 20 years. Artyom expressed apologies to the victims' families, but had distanced himself from some of the murders. Nikita had remained emotionless throughout the legal proceedings, raising questions about his influence. These 2 young men sought to emulate the monsters of Dnepropetrovsk, and their terrible story concluded with their incarceration. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to follow for more crime stories.